Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. As you're all probably aware by now, we're having some technical difficulties. So while we wanted to play a video, we're having trouble with the audio and are not sure if that's going to work tonight. In the meantime, though, thank you all for joining us. We still have other stuff planned. This event, I'd just like to start off by acknowledging this event is being held on Treaty 6 territory. This is the land of the Cree, Saulteaux, Dene, Dakota, Nakota, and Lakota, and homeland of the Métis. My name is Jasper. I'm the events coordinator here at McNally Robinson, Saskatoon, and it's my pleasure to welcome you to the Saskatoon. It's not really a launch, the book has been out for a while, but the Saskatoon event for The Traitor's Daughter by Roxana Spicer, which was published by Penguin Canada. I'd like to thank Roxana for being here tonight and for all of her patience with everything that's been going wrong. I'd also like to thank Ruta at Penguin for working with us to create this event. Couldn't have done it without her. This event is going to be live streamed, so there's a web camera up to your right here. We will not be filming the audience at all. However, if your phone goes off during the event, it will probably pick up on that. So to save yourself the embarrassment of having that live on the internet forever, maybe just check that your phone's muted or turned off. Hopefully that. Try it. Sorry. No, that's okay. Okay, just a couple more housekeeping things. If you'd like to buy a copy of the book, we have some up on the signing table here where Roxana will be signing after the event. We also have some by the desk where you first came in. And yes, we're going to try the video. We've got an idea now, but I'd just like to say a few words of introduction for Roxana Spicer, in case anyone here is not familiar with her or her work.
I'm so happy to be home. You have no idea. I'm helping you. Go ahead.
I didn't think it was that bad, but thank you.
No, okay.
Roxana Spicer herself, right over here, grew up in Netherhill, Saskatchewan, which is population 80, is or still is.
11.
11. Oh, it's population 11 now. As a documentary filmmaker and former CBC investigative journalist, her award-winning work across Canada led to real change. She has pursued stories in remotest Ecuador, the Arabian Desert, and the North Sea. She's reported from a high-tech ocean dive ship, a nomadic Kyrgyz yurt, not sure if I said that right, and made multiple trips to Russia during the Wild West years following the fall of the Soviet Union. However, the most elusive interview subject over her 40-year career remained her own mother. Roxana currently lives in Toronto, but she's come back here to grace us with her presence and to talk. I think it's a grace.
I'm not going to do grace.
No grace, never mind. And to talk about her book. Now, let's see.
Okay, let's do this. Let me introduce the video.
Okay.
And then I'm gonna give you a note.
All right, I'll hand this over to you.
But
I've got enough.
so we don't go too far away.
I thought I was nervous, but I'm not. First of all, I'm just going to I want to tell you a little story. The other day, I was on the 14th floor of corporate headquarters of Penguin Random House Canada, which is the largest publishing house in Canada. I'm very thrilled to be part of that family. When Margaret Atwood got off the same elevator as me and took the adjoining room to do her audiobook. And I interviewed many important people, high profile people around the world. Hello, this is Margaret Atwood. My tongue stuck to the top of my mouth. I couldn't even get it together to say, hi, Maggie, like nothing. I just, slipped into the room next to my audio booth because I did the audio version of this book. But the reason that I mentioned Margaret Atwood, apart from the fact that I'm shamelessly name dropping, is that when Margaret Atwood, I became friends with Margaret Atwood's biographer in Toronto. She actually graces the back cover of the book with one of what we call the blurb, which sounds a little bit I don't know, like bad indigestion or something, but it's actually when someone says something nice about your book. And Rosemary Sullivan gave me a blurb, and Rosemary Sullivan also gave me such an interesting story about Margaret Atwood when she was in my position doing her first book readings across Canada. And I have to say, she did not have the experience that I'm having tonight. She described a story to her biographer where she is all pumped up. I can relate to that. I mean, the adrenaline is really moving here. And she walked into a room on her first book with one person in attendance. So let me start by thanking everyone who has made the trip to be here this evening. I'm still getting over the idea that someone actually wants my autograph. My brothers can't believe it either. But I'm really thrilled and honored, and I really mean that from the bottom of my heart. And I don't want anyone to leave tonight without a signed copy of the book. Jasper, I'm gonna get to you in a second, so don't get too comfortable.
Okay.
Before I arrived here this evening at this lovely, impressive venue for book lovers, I had the incredible experience of taking the Traitor's daughter back to Netherhill, Saskatchewan, and back to Kindersley, where I went to school. But Netherhill, Saskatchewan is my hometown. I'm very pleased to see a few delegates from Netherhill here tonight. Somehow bringing my mother's story back to Saskatchewan by doing a book launch in Saskatchewan seems so terribly appropriate, so poignant, so bittersweet, and so very, very deeply emotional because my mother's ashes lie 2 hours from where we sit this evening. She rests with my dad in the Netherhill Cemetery, and I went to the cemetery to lay flowers with my friends there for the launch a couple of days ago. And I felt such a powerful connection to the land and to her story, and to physically take the book there. And I just had to have my picture taken beside Mom's gravesite with the book. And somehow I felt that she knew that I had done this thing, that I had delivered on the promise that I had said to her as a 10-year-old kid, in Kindersley, Saskatchewan, that I was going to write a book about her. No one told me it was going to take 30 years, but depending on how you count it. But I'm so glad that I was able to do that, and I felt that it was really poetic, and I feel by extension that poetry in this room this evening, because among the lovely faces gathered, wonderful faces that are gathered here this evening, are the representatives, the flesh and blood, the beating heart of the File family. The Files are very well, I can say, as much as this book is a story about my mother, it is also a family story, in part about the Files from Bruno, Saskatchewan, because but for a quirk of nature, I might have been a File. My mother married Jack File as a war bride in Amsterdam in February of 1946. And also, as we are here now, we are together not that far from the Saskatchewan River, where the fate of my mother as a new Canadian war bride and the fate of her new husband, Jack File, changed on one sunny July morning in 1947. Now, my intention was to show a video, but I'm not going to interrupt myself now because I'm on a bit of a roll. If everybody's okay with me continuing to talk, I'm going to tell you the rest of the story. Well, actually, you know what I'm going to do? I I need to tell you, we're going to get into the war story, but I would first of all, I want to tell you a love story because everybody loves a love story, even a love story that ends in tragedy. Um, the only photograph that I ever saw of my mother kissing a man with passion and desire was the photograph that I have of Agnes kissing Jack File on the streets of Amsterdam in the hour after they had just gotten married at a cathedral in in Amsterdam, a place that I also went to visit. Um, After that moment was captured by a Dutch guy who made a business out of taking wonderful candid photographs of these heroic Canadian soldiers who had married Dutch women, but mom became the only war bride from Russia married in Holland. And I can say that definitively because of the research that I've done. Um, then I need to take that story from that moment to where we are now, which is a few miles away from the Saskatchewan River. And I write about that now. Jack, I want to set this up properly. Raymond File is here. Raymond File is part of the File clan. I'm going to start with a quote from him, and then I'm going to move into just a short section, maybe 4 or 5 minutes, that describing this fate, and how I ended up being here instead of a File, but a Spicer. So this is in the months after the war. I interviewed Raymond File. He may not remember this. I said, what was the family like? He said, we were like a nest of Germans. This was a German immigrant family from the last century, and he laughed and he recalled how his mom and dad, his uncles, his aunts and grandparents counted the days until Christmas 1946, when Uncle Jack was due back from overseas. Agnes figured out that the kitchen hand pump for soft water was for washing, and the outhouse at the end of the yard was for doing her duty. A tool holder faced out onto the wide open prairie. Agnes wore high heels around the pig farm, her heels sunk into the mud. Her her right arm folded over a tattooed forearm. At night, they ate by the light of paraffin lamps. After supper, when all the dishes were put away, Agnes played cards. Not a game of solitaire, not exactly. Something Russian. Jack's last surviving brother, Lawrence, said, remembering one night in particular when Agnes shuffled the deck and drew a single card. The expression, such a shudder such a shudder on her face, the 90-year-old prairie farmer could never forget. Agnes drew the Queen of Spades, the Russian card of death. Now I'm going to fast forward a little bit. Christmas Eve, 1946. Jack is finally back from overseas. Agnes got arrived in Canada by herself. They've just been reunited, and now they're sharing an abode. You may remember some of this. The year is now 1947. Snowdrifts reached the roof line of the little hovel stuffed with Germans the winter of 1947, one of the coldest on record in Saskatchewan. A neighboring farmer cut a hole in the roof of his barn so he could crawl in to feed his cows. Jack and Agnes crowded into the 3-room house Mom mistook for a barn with 5 strangers, including the old man in the last stages of lung cancer, hacking a phlegmy cough. Mumfile was always there, finding ways to make Agnes feel at home. But there was no chance for privacy. Come spring, however, it was a different story. I pulled off the highway on my way to meet Jack's last surviving sibling in Bruno, Saskatchewan. I wanted to feel the landscape as they had. Jack and Agnes, young and in love. I took off my shoes as I'd done in Germany before stepping into the Rhine near Duisburg, outside of Essen, where American soldiers turned Agnes back when she was walking the wrong way, trying to go home. I laid down in the prairie grass off the road to the Saskatchewan River, as I imagined Jack and Agnes had the summer of 1947, in the days before everything changed again. I drove on to the house of Jack's 90-year-old brother, Laurie. From a forgotten shoebox retrieved from under his bed, he found one sad little picture. 2 newlyweds posing in the open doorway of a tar paper shack, an old mattress lying out front above the bare earth on some kind of a metal frame. But then I took a closer look. There are buds on that little tree that looked freshly planted outside the only window, which is decorated with delicate lace curtains and tchotchkes along the windowsill. Maybe they hoisted the mattress outside to air it out the day they moved into their first little home. Their first chance to be alone. Maybe that's why they're grinning ear to ear. Jack in suspenders over a clean white shirt, pressed trousers, civilian shoes. Agnes in a smart dress, protected by the only apron I ever saw her wear. He's got his arm around my mother's waist in the last photograph ever taken of Jack File. The sun broke over the horizon on July 22nd, 1947. Dugouts stirred, ducks sought insects skirting the watery surface. The air is alive, buzzing, already hot at dawn, that dry heat of the Canadian prairie. You have to feel it to believe it. Jack fired up the Whippet, the pride of his father, who got one of the last models of the small car to come off the Toronto assembly line. An army buddy just got back from Europe. Something else to celebrate besides his birthday. The buddy brought his family to visit. They raced towards the Saskatchewan River, kicking up dust, diving into potholes, clattering over washboard dirt roads. They laughed their heads off, though the jokes are lost on Agnes. Jack's friends didn't speak German, and she still spoke almost no English. But the joy of the unfolding summer's day is infectious and universal, transcending language. These are the moments that belong to the young, even those who've seen more in youth than they ever wanted to. 2 happy couples collapsed on the grassy bank of the Saskatchewan. This is the voice now I hear of my mother. The countryside looked quite nice, very green. You want to go in the river for a little swim, have a picnic. And that's what we done on Jack's 27th birthday. His army buddy came to visit him, just mustered out of the army. And he got 2 children. One, babe in arms. One, 3 3-year-old little girl. I don't remember his wife's name, not even her face. It was very hot. I don't like to wade. I never put my feet down. So I went looking for deep water to swim. And I always like to swim like at home, against the current up to a certain point, then permit myself the luxury of going with the current like an arrow. Wonderful feeling. And that's what I done. I swam towards the bridge, heading to where I started. It didn't dawn on me. There was nobody there except this woman sitting with the baby, yelling and yelling. And she pointed down there. They're all gone. Jack and his friend and the 3-year-old girl. And so I ran up to the highway, yelling for help. Some people come running with grapplers. I kept on yelling, no, 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 you can't do that. He's a good, healthy man. He'll come out. Don't use those. Never saw grapplers before. Only there was no body. And the next day, they found him 6 miles down the river, standing up to here. She indicates to her chest, in the quicksand. Yeah. Nothing of his body. Couldn't find him. That little girl came floating up on the other side of the river. Moss now grows over a weathered headstone in a village graveyard beyond the dirt streets of Bruno. Wheat stalks bend and bow in a hot wind, the kind of prairie wind that can drive you insane. The cold, dark stone is engraved in Gothic font. In loving memory, my beloved husband, Jacob File, 1920 to 1947. God alone understands. Okay, so this is the story, I guess you could say. There's hope for the technical aspect yet. I guess you could say in some fashion that I owe my existence to quicksand. The untimely death of Jack suddenly meant that Agnes, not speaking any English, was marooned in Saskatchewan, not sure what her fate was going to be, certainly not knowing what was going to happen next. And it makes me, I'm going to try and play back the video now. Can you, just before you do that, we're going to do a little setup. And if this is really too annoying, we'll drop it and you'll just have to listen to me do some more reading. But I want to show you this video for a couple of reasons. For me to pick up the story from this point and to put together what happened before the love story and after the love story was only possible because of the fall of the Soviet Union in 1991, something that we may dismiss more or less as a kind of an anomaly in our history books, but actually had a huge effect on our family in Netherhill, Saskatchewan, off the number 7 highway, because the fall of the Soviet Union in 1991 enabled my mother to do something that she had always dreamt of doing, what she was desperate to do that day that she lost her husband. She wanted to go home. She wanted to go back to Russia, but she couldn't go back, not to the Soviet Union, not until the actual collapse in 1991. When that happened, thinking, finally, I found the secret of my mother's happiness. I'll take her back to Russia. I said, Mom, I phoned her from Toronto. I said, Mom, it's time. We have to go back, because the borders were open for the first time. And she said, Roxana, what the hell would I be doing that? Why would you want to take me back to the land of strangers and graveyards? So that was the working title for the film that I started 32 years ago, and that's what I'd like to play back now.
Your computer's locked me out.
I'm gonna excuse myself now. Unfortunately, I don't sing, so you just have to wait. Let's just play it. See what happens. Ready? Where's the sound coming from? Here? Okay, so try it. It took 50 years to erase the past and 20 days to bring it back. Strangers and graveyards. My mother's story. I could smell Russia as soon as I got there. All of a sudden, like I never been away. That's when the reality set in. Half a century later, reunited. A lost sister found. Our roots run awful deep and painful. And that's memories awakened. Everything you start flashing back, but couldn't help it. A childhood lost. It's just like being a stranger somewhere, wandering, and all of a sudden you are back home. That's where I spent all my life as a young woman. Everything is gone. There's only the mountainside. She was a Red Army soldier captured on the first day of the war, forced into slave labor. She witnessed atrocities.
Her best friend. And how comes the many millions died? Now here out, now it's scratch. Guilt. Painful discoveries. Her own mother, casualty of the gun law. I still see her in my eyes. My grandmother's house. They found my diaries. We will photograph sewn in a coat lining keeps her sane. Escape disguised as a Canadian soldier. Very frightened, very scared. I was never able to return. The point of no return. Family, friends, a lifetime cut off behind the red curtain. Wonderful end of my life story because even if something happened and I die, I've done it. Yeah, Gordy, now was not which I was. Never the wash don't yes strangers in graveyards. My mother's story.
I'm going to assume that this is what I'd like to propose. I really want the wonderful faces in the back to have the opportunity to get the effect of that video. And what I'm going to propose is that I actually start signing books, more or less for the front half of the room. And why don't we just play the video for the folks who didn't? We'll just keep it, play it on a loop. Yeah, but not. I think that we'll just the way we do the book signing, we'll just move back there if that's all right. Am I correct that the sound was a bit lame back there? Yeah, okay. That's really frustrating. Who hasn't had a television set that broke down? We've all been there, right? Really annoying. So, but we'll figure it out. I just wanted to share that with you. You know what I love about writing? Nothing. But okay, no, seriously, what I love it when it's over, but actually I kind of like it while it's happening. But one of the things about writing is that you never have to worry about any technical problems except running out of ink. I want to. I think we're gonna. What I'd suggest, if Jasper, if you think, I'd like to talk about the cover of the book is a visual that you can all see. The title of the book, which has multi layers, and I think we should break for a little signing, a little visit, and then we'll play the video again for those who'd like to get a little closer to the speakers. Does that sound like a good plan? Oh, look at all your wonderful people. Poor Margaret Atwood, she only got one. I'm sure there must be other people who are completely thrilled. What's that? Oh, listen, don't give away any secrets. I think if the File family wants to help keep my mother on the national bestsellers list for week number 5, I'm all for it. So I thank you. Now, having said that, I want to draw your attention to the cover of the book. The photograph on the cover of the book has a story. And it is a story that I'm only able to tell because of the fall of the Soviet Union. I'm not going to give you a whole history lesson, but I'm going to say that once the Soviet Union collapsed, this represented the end of my mother's story in a certain fashion. She was able to go home, and the beginning of my story as a journalist, a daughter who could actually start to put together the pieces of a very complicated history from the Second World War. A history that went behind the Iron Curtain, a history that is very hard to comprehend in this current context. But I just want to say that in piecing it together, I found myself in 30, no, in 10 countries, in 3 continents, researching off and on for 30 years. My research took me from the flatlands of Saskatchewan to the cracked concrete of the registration building for women being taken to Auschwitz in Poland, to the roof of the SS headquarters overlooking Hitler's first and largest Nazi camp just for women north of Berlin. My search took me into the vaults of the largest collection of Nazi documents in the world in central Germany, into the temperature-controlled vaults of the U.S. Holocaust Museum in central Maryland, across the kitchen table of my Russian aunt in the Ural Mountains, and the last living eyewitness to my mother's wartime story, an absolutely delight, Frau Biermann in Bad Salzuflen, Germany, who was an 11-year-old girl and remembered a Russian woman working the fields next to her parents. She responded to an ad in the paper that I ran when I was on my last research trip in Europe and in Germany. She came running out of her house, threw her arms around me, and said in German, "Now I can rest easy. I have Agnes in my arms." I thought she was a crankpot. I confess, I'm ashamed, but I thought I'll have a nice coffee with her. We'll eat some chocolate. It'll be a good story one way or the other. We went inside the little house, and she began to give me exquisite detail about a 26-year-old Saskatchewan farmer, an infantryman by the name of Jack Fire, a handsome man with broad shoulders and very dapper in his Canadian uniform. She told me other things that she couldn't possibly have made up. And then I realized this is really a miracle. This is like 75 years after the end of the war. And here this 89-year-old woman is sharing such detail with me. And so she really gives a kind of vivacity to the days in the immediate aftermath of the end of the war, when my mother is no longer running from Germans, from Nazis. No, 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 no. The war is over. Germany is occupied now by the French, the Americans, and the largest occupation force, the British. And who else? The Russians. I'm going to leave you with one story about the KGB, because Well, who hasn't heard of James Bond? I never thought I'd ever live long enough to put James Bond and Agnes Spicer in the same sentence, but I can do anything now that I'm a writer. It's a true story. James Bond is a series of books. He is a fictional character created by a real undercover agent, a British agent by the name of Fleming, Ian Fleming. There, in 6 of the James Bond books, there is an organization that sounds like a case of real indigestion. The organization is called SMERSH. SMERSH. This is an acronym in Russian that means death to spies. Anyone who reads this is going to think, wow, that Ian guy's got a great imagination. No one would actually imagine that there was a real organization called SMERSH, Death to Spies, but there was. And there were 20,000 such agents dispersed across Europe in the months immediately after the war with the express purpose of looking for my mother and other people like my mother, other slave laborers, other POWs, other people, Russians, just Russians who had survived the concentration camps. So these roundup forces of SMERSH agents worked in 23 countries, but most particularly in Germany. And their headquarters was about half a mile from where my mother was released after the war. So when I say that she was pursued by KGB agents on the front cover, that's not hyperbole, that's a true story. The notion of history, how to tell history, how to make history come alive. This was a challenge that I had throughout the whole book. I now leave it up to you to decide if I succeeded in doing what I set out to do, which is to take the story of one woman and make her live in your imagination, in your heart, in your soul, perhaps as an inspiration for your daughters and your granddaughters, as she is for me. And of course, I'm talking about the mother, I'm talking about my own mother. So this is a book that spans a century, that is a mother-daughter story. It is a woman's story. It is a story of war from a very specific point of view. Ladies and gentlemen, during the Second World War, Canada sent 1 million men into battle in the Navy, Air Force, and the Army. The Second World War saw only one country send women to the front lines in a combat role, and that country was Russia. My mother's story is one of 1 million women. Most of them kept silent for reasons that will become obvious to you as you read the book. But now I want to leave you so that you can, get going on buying this book and figuring out what the cliffhanger was all about. And I thank you so much for your patience, and I thank Jasper for his enthusiasm and his intent to show us the video, and we're going to find a way that everyone gets to see at least part of it. So I thank you.